Okay, so tonight I wanted to talk about Esav. Esav, in English, Esau, the brother of Yaakov, brother of Jacob, the twin brother, who is known as Esav Harasha, the wicked Esav, and he was. But there's one trait or one mitzvah that Esav actually excelled in. And that's really what I want to focus the discussion primarily around, which is not, well, the mitzvah that he excelled in is the mitzvah of kibud av, honoring his father, maybe his mother too, but it seems mainly it was honoring his father. And so we've spoken before, we've had a class or two, I think one actually, about Kibud Avaim, the mitzvah in general, and we did the 10 Commandments, for those of you who are with us. So the class isn't per se about honoring parents, but it's really about Esav's relationship and trying to understand how and why Esav, who was so wicked, on the other hand, he had this one mitzvah that he excelled in. So what was motivating him? And should that be what motivates us in when we perform this mitzvah? Not necessarily relevant for all of us per se now, but to understand in general, when a Jew, who has parents and is honoring them, what should be the motivation? Should it be that of Esav? So again, our focus isn't really necessarily the mitzvah, and we're not going to go into all the details and what the motivations should be necessarily, maybe a little bit, but we'll see what Esav's was and then try to maybe take from there. So let's start from the beginning. So one of the places where we see this brought out that Esav excelled in honoring his father was at the end of this week's Torah portion, Parshas Toldos. So Yitzchak, Isaac, wants to give a blessing to his firstborn, and Esav is the firstborn. Now, Yitzchak doesn't know that actually Esav sold his firstborn rights to Yaakov, to Jacob. So he's planning to give the blessing to Yaakov, to Esav, and he sends Esav out to bring him a meal, and that is supposed to be like a lead up to giving the blessing, put him in the proper mood to give a good blessing. So meanwhile, their mother, Rebecca, hears what's going on, and she wants Yaakov to receive the blessing. And so she is going to help Yaakov ensure that he gets the blessing. So the strategy that she decides on is she's going to dress up Yaakov like Esav. Yitzchak is blind; he won't see who it is, and he'll feel him, and he'll think that it's Esav, and he'll give him the blessing. So that's where we will pick up on the first source. If you have the source sheet, so in chapter 27, verse 15, the verse says, "And Rivka took the costly garments of Esav, or the fine garments of Esav, her elder son, which were with her in the house, and she dressed Jacob, her younger son." So interestingly, Esav has gone out. He's left his fine garments at home, actually in the hands of his mother, even though Esav had a number of wives, but he didn't trust them, the Midrash says, but he trusted his mother, that she would be the one who kept his fine garments. So Rivka takes these garments and dresses Yaakov in them. So the Midrash here enlightens us a little bit about the greatness of Esav's performance of honoring his father. And the Midrash says as follows, it's source 2. Rivka took the clothes of Esav, the fine ones. So that's this verse. It quotes the verse. And in Hebrew, the word to describe like the fine ones or the costly ones, as is translated up there, So as chamudos or chamudot. So that also can mean like the coveted ones. So the Midrash elaborates on that, and it says those which he coveted from Nimrod. Nimrod had been this great king, and Esav, the Midrash teaches us, actually Nimrod was in possession of these garments. Esav coveted them and killed him and took them. So these garments, these special garments, came from Nimrod, and Esav stole them from him. That is the meaning of what is written in Mishlei. In Proverbs, it says, the wicked covet the catch of evil men. So he coveted that which belonged to a different evil man, and that was Nimrod. So those were the garments that we're talking about. And then it says that were with her in the house. So these are these special garments that his mother is holding on to. They were with his mother in the house. For with them, he would serve his father. What's it teaching us when it tells us they were in the house? What it tells you is that he went out, but he didn't take his special garments with him to go out. They were meant for in the house. He only wore those apparently in the house. And what does that teach you? So here, the Midrash says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, all my days I served my father. This great sage, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Gamliel, also a great sage. He says, all my days I served my father, but I did not serve him even 1/100th of the way Esav served his father. When I would serve my father, I would serve him in dirty clothing. And when I would go out to travel, I would go out in clean clothing. In other words, not necessarily was his clothing always dirty, but he wouldn't get dressed up in special clothes to serve his father. When will he get dressed up in his special clothes? When he had somewhere to go. He's going out, he's going traveling, he's not going on a business trip, he's going to an event, right? So that's when he would get dressed up. But at home he wore his regular clothes or his dirty clothes. But Esav, when he would serve his father, he would only serve him in royal clothes. In other words, these special royal garments that Esav had stolen from Nimrod, so he reserved them for very special occasions, not for when he went out to special events and business trips, etc., but for when he would serve his father. He said, it is only befitting of my father's honor for him to be served in royal clothes. So that's what the verse is teaching us, according to the Midrash, when it says that Rivka took the costly garments of Esav, which were with her in the house, meaning these are the ones he kept in the house. That's what it's telling you. He kept the most special royal garments in the house, and it's those that he wore when he served his father. Comes the great sage Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, generations and generations later, and he says that in terms of this particular commandment, this particular mitzvah, I am nothing compared to Esav. I have not served my father even 1/100th of the way that Esav served his father. So here's one place where the sages are speaking of Esav as in really glowing terms, in terms of his ability in serving his father. Not just ability, but attention and care and just adherence to this important mitzvah. Okay, so as we mentioned, it's very interesting because Esav, you see the Midrash is telling us he saw something he wanted, he killed the guy, took them. We're not talking about, a nice guy here, Esav. And yet there's one mitzvah that he excels in, and that's kibud av va'im, honoring his parents, or at least honoring his father. And we have to understand how you can have such a balance. Just to add another layer to this, not directly related to Esav, but kind of an interesting angle, is based on this next passage, source number 3, which is which is from the Talmud in Kiddushin. So the Gemara there brings the following. It says, Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says, they asked Rabbi Eliezer, so these are sages of the Talmud, they asked Rabbi Eliezer, how far must one go to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring one's father and mother? So as I mentioned in the past, the bold is the actual text, the unbold is elucidation. I don't know if I would necessarily take I think we could just stick with the bold for that line. I should have taken out. How far does it go? How far can one go in honoring their father and mother? That's the Gemara's question. So Rabbi Eliezer said to them, go and see what one Gentile did for his father in Ashkelon. And the name of the son was Dama ben Netina. Dama ben Nesina. So this was a Gentile. He was living in Ashkelon, which is in Israel, but seemingly he was a Roman. And we see there's another story the Talmud brings that he had, he was a high-ranking Roman, or he definitely, was in with the high-ranking Romans. And Rabbi Eliezer said, if you want to hear about honoring your parents, go and see what Dama ben Nesina did. That's going to be the paradigm example of greatness in honoring parents. What happened? Once the sages wished to purchase precious stones from him for the ephod of the high priest for 600,000 gold dinars profit. So actually we have a little hint over here that this story is happening apparently during the temple period, because they're buying they're looking to buy the stone for the or some of the stones for the ephod, which was one of the garments that the high priest wore. So they're recounting actually something that had happened earlier on in history. Seemingly they had the stones, and maybe one fell out, got lost, whatever it was, and they needed to replace them. And these were very, very unique and very special stones. And they heard that this certain Roman who lived in Ashkelon, Dama, the son of Nesina, had in his possession at least one of these stones or some of these stones, and they wanted to go and buy them. So the story goes that they were going to pay him 600,000 gold dinars profit. Some say it was 800. The Rav Kahana taught that it was 800,000 gold dinars profit. So they get there, and the key to the chest holding the jewels was placed under his father's head, and he would not disturb him. So that was the story, basically. That's all it tells us. I mean, the story was the sages arrived, they knocked on the door, and they said, we heard you have these precious stones, we'd like to purchase them. Dama ben Nesina said, I'd love to sell them to you, but I can't wake up my father. And the key to the box that I keep them in is my father's sleeping on top of it's under the pillow or something that my father's sleeping, and he wouldn't wake him up. Now, for some reason, they weren't able to wait. It doesn't give us the details, but that was the end of it. They were not going, he was not going to make this sale and make this great amount of profit. Now some of the commentaries wonder, well, how is this really required that he not wake up his father? He's losing out on a great amount of profit here. A person only isn't, for example, a person isn't required to pay from their own money to honor their parents. Actually, they can. There's a requirement to honor one's parents, but it's on the parent's dime. So here he's giving up his own profits here. So some of the commentaries say, well, it's a profit. He's not actually giving something up. He's just not earning profit. Some say it's true. He didn't have to do this. He went beyond the letter of the law. There's no law for him because he's a Gentile. He doesn't have this commandment. But even the way that we understand it for our halacha, he was going beyond the letter of the law. So, but he's held up as the paradigm that he wouldn't wake up his father, even though he lost a great profit from not waking up his father. Now the Talmud goes on, it tells us that the next year, the Holy One, blessed be he, gave Dama ben Nesina his reward, as a red heifer was born in his herd, and the Jews needed it. So a red heifer, there have only been 9 in our history. They are needed for the purpose of purifying people, and so it was a big deal to get their hands on a red heifer. I should say there have only been 9 that qualified. Every once in a while there's a red heifer that's born, but there's certain qualifications it has to meet. So they wanted to buy his red heifer. When the sages of Israel came to him, he said to them, I know concerning you that if I were to ask for all the money in the world, you would give it to me, but I ask only that money that I lost due to the honor of my father. He said, I realized, he basically recognized that God had rewarded him for honoring his father, and therefore he agreed to sell them the red heifer for the same price that he would have gotten for those stones. And Rabbi Hanina says, this last paragraph in number 3, if this is related about one who was not commanded by the Torah to honor his father, since he was a Gentile, and yet, nevertheless, when he performed the mitzvah, he was given this great reward, all the more so, one who was commanded to fulfill the mitzvah and performs it. Okay, so we, if Dama ben Nesina, who didn't even have this commandment, it's not one of the 7 Noahide laws to honor parents. They're not commanding it, yet he excelled in it. He did, he is the viewed as like a paradigm for everyone. When the question was posed, how far must one go? He's the example that's brought. So, how much more so should we extend ourselves to fulfill this commandment? That's what the Talmud says. So what I really want to just bring out from the story is not so much the details of the story, but it's quite fascinating. Who are the greatest performers of honoring parents? We have one place, the Midrash, where Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, there's nobody who did it as well as Esav. I serve my father 1/100th of the way that Esav served his father. And then we have in the Talmud, what's the paradigm example of honoring parents? A Roman, a Gentile, Dama ben Nesina. That's the paradigm example. They couldn't find a nice Jew who did a great job of honoring his parents as an example. In all of Israel, they're to bring out a story. And as I mentioned, this story must have happened many years earlier. And in all those years, amongst all the Jewish people, they couldn't find an example of someone who honored his parents, as equivalent to the extent that Dama ben Nesina did. But apparently not. And apparently there seems to be that a Gentile and Esav, Esav would have the status of a Gentile versus Yaakov as our forefather, sort of part of the lineage of the Jewish people. We would say, whatever his exact status was, but he will represent someone who's Jewish, and Esav would be the Gentile. And yet those are the paradigms. You have Esav, you have Dama ben Nesina, and it's so fascinating. Why is it this way? Why is it that we find that these Gentiles are the paradigms for honoring parents? So we'll give it, I guess, a couple of approaches to that question, and then we'll have another approach which doesn't really relate to Dama ben Nesina, but more relates to Esav specifically. And we'll start by actually going a little bit back into the backstory somewhat of Esav's birth and his life, and trying to understand. There's a very fascinating potential backstory to Esav. So if we go to the last source, which is labeled number 1 again for some reason, but it really should be number 4. So Voracious Genesis chapter 25, and this is when Rivka is pregnant with twins, and I don't know, she doesn't even know that she's pregnant with twins, but she feels something going on inside of her, and the verse says as follows. So chapter 25, verse 22, it says, "And the children struggled within her, and she said, 'If it be so, why am I like this?' And she went to inquire of the Lord," which means she went to one of the prophets of the time and tried to find out why do I have this struggling within me. The one famous midrash about this, which Rashi quotes, which I didn't include on the sheet, is that when she would walk past a place of Torah, she would feel the baby kicking, trying to get out. When she would walk past a place of idolatry, she would feel the baby kicking and try to get out. And she basically was like, "What's wrong with this baby? Why, he seems so confused." And she didn't realize that there was 2 babies. There was twins. But Rashi, in a second explanation, which I did put on the sheet, says something which seems very deep. He says they were struggling with each other and quarreling about the inheritance of the 2 worlds. So she felt this wrestling going on inside of her, and why were they wrestling? What was going on inside? So Rashi, based on the midrash, expounds on this and says that they were struggling with each other and quarreling about the inheritance of the 2 worlds. What are the 2 worlds? 2 worlds are Olam Hazeh, this world, and Olam Haba, the world to come. And there was some kind of struggle going on about these 2 worlds. It's not clear what that means. What were they struggling about? Seemingly for control. Who would have control in this world? Who would have control in the next world? And then the next verse says, verse 23, "And the Lord said to her," again, it's usually understood to mean that there was a prophet that was speaking to her, that 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 kingdoms will separate from your innards, and one kingdom will become mightier than the other kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger. Basically, she's told that it's actually, you have twins in there, and they're going to, 2 kingdoms are going to come from them. There's going to be a sort of eternal struggle between them, and that's the eternal struggle of Yaakov, Jacob, and his descendants, and Esav and his descendants. So, but Rashi again is telling us that there was somehow some kind of quarrel regarding the inheritance of the 2 worlds, this world and the next world. So there's another midrash that seems to understand that they eventually came to an agreement. And the midrash says as follows. It says the rabbis taught, and this is not on the source sheet. It says when Yaakov and Esav were still in their mother's womb, Yaakov said to Esav, "Esav, my brother, we're 2 brothers, and there are 2 worlds." So I guess maybe it could be, if we put this together with the other midrash, they were struggling. They each wanted to be, the inheritors of both worlds. So finally, Yaakov says, "Listen, there's 2 worlds. There's this world, and then there's the next world. This world has eating and drinking, business, marriage, children. It has life, material life. But the next world is not like that. It's a spiritual place, a place of souls." So he says, "If it's your desire, you take this world and I'll take the next world." So that's what Yaakov finally offered Esav. You could be in control in this world, in Olam Hazeh. I'll be in charge. I'll be the inheritor of the next world. And the midrash says, how do we know that that's actually what happened? So the midrash quotes the verse when Yaakov when Yaakov is cooking food and Esav comes in and he's very hungry and he demands some of the lentils that Yaakov is making, Yaakov says, sell to me this day your firstborn rights. And those firstborn rights are understood to be the spiritual leader. Who's going to be the spiritual leader? Sell me those rights. And Esav agrees. But it says sell me them on this day, as if it was something they had discussed previously. So it's today's the day we make it a deal. That's how the Midrash understands that. And right, it says, just as we agreed to in the womb, let's affirm it. So, and it says, so at that time, Esav took his portion in this world, and Yaakov took his portion in the next world. Actually, the Midrash goes on and it says that later, when Yaakov had to eventually run away from Esav. He then spent many years in his uncle Lavan's house, where he married and had children and actually became very, very wealthy. So all those things that he had told Esav that this world is all about, and you'll get that, and I'll get the next world, all of a sudden Yaakov has it. He has all those things. He has wealth and wives and children and everything that he had said. And he comes and he meets up with Esav. And Esav says to him, didn't you say that you're going to take your world, your reward in the next world and not in this world? And look, you have all this wealth. So Yaakov responded to him, this is just the portion that Hashem has given me, that God has given me, and it's to use in this world, but it's really to help me get to the next world, basically. So Yaakov responds that it's true, I've been blessed with this, but this is here to help me in getting to the next world. So it's part of my reward for the next world, or part of allowing me to come to the next world. This is what God has given me to enable me to be able to get to the next world. Okay, that's sort of a side point. But there's this agreement, according to the Midrash, that Esav would have the rights in this world and control in this world, and Yaakov would control the rights in the next world. So it's actually interesting. Another kind of step that we can discuss on this topic maybe takes us a little bit away from the Kibbur Avayim for a minute, from the honoring parents. But one of the things that Esav would do to his father, so it says in the verse that Yitzchak loved, right, Isaac, Esav's father. It says he loved Esav because he was Sayed Bifiv. Sayed Bifiv means there was game in his mouth. In other words, Esav would bring home food and he would feed Yitzchak, and Yitzchak loved Esav. That's the simple meaning of the verse. But the Midrash, again, Rashi quoting it, says that it can be understood differently. Yitzchak loved Esav because there were trappings in Esav's mouth. In other words, Esav would entrap Yitzchak. He would trick Yitzchak with what he would say, and therefore Yitzchak loved him because he thought that Esav was someone who he was not. What would Esav say? So the Midrash says he would ask shailas, he would ask questions, halachic queries. He would ask, it says, how do you take meiser? How do you tithe salt? So he would ask, how do you tithe salt? Now, by the way, salt is not something that is required to be tithed. Fruits and vegetables that grow in Israel have to be tithed. They have to, a tenth has to be taken from them. But but salt doesn't need to be. But Esav would ask, how do you tithe salt? He would also ask, how do you tithe straw? Straw is not food, right? Straw is the outside of the wheat. It's the chaff and from the wheat not the chaff, but the shells, and it's not food. It also doesn't need to be tithed. But that's what he would ask, and he would make himself look so religious in front of his father. Look, I'm so careful, and that's how he would trick his father. That's what the Midrash says. But maybe a deeper understanding approach to this Midrash is taught by the Esav Sofer. Esav Sofer, Rabbi Shimon Sofer, and his father actually was the Chasam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer, and he also has a similar idea that come together, and he put them together. It basically goes like this: we have a concept of within really the tribes of Israel. There are two tribes that are a partnership, and that is the tribe of Yisachar and Zevulun. And traditionally, we understand that Yisachar were sort of the Torah scholars and the spiritual leaders, and Zevulun were business people, and they had a deal with Yisachar that they would support Yisachar. Yisachar would study Torah and develop spiritually, and they would support them, and it was a deal. They would basically split the spiritual profits, the spiritual reward. That the Zevulun would enable Yisachar, and then Yisachar would study, and that way it was a partnership, and they would both be rewarded for it. So the Chasam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer, says that this was a potential arrangement that could have been, and maybe should have been, between Esav and Yaakov. We said Esav gets this world, Yaakov gets the next world, but it didn't have to be that way. It could have been Esav focuses on this world, Yaakov focuses on the next world, but they partner together, and really they could sort of split the profits, split both. That Esav could have been the one to be blessed with wealth in this world in order to support Yaakov, and that way they would both earn reward in both this world and the next world. That was potentially what could have been the arrangement, and but Esav did not end up choosing that path. But suggests the Esav Sofer, Esav wanted to make his father think that that's what he was doing. So he would go and he would ask his father, how do I tithe salt? Because not only do I provide food for Jacob and for Torah scholars and support those pursuing spiritual endeavors, but not only do I tithe the produce, I even tithe the salt. I even give them salt. I give them whatever they need, and I even give them straw to sleep on, and I tithe that to give them, and I'm absolutely supporting them. And so it could be, when we say that he was tricking his father, when he would ask him that, he wasn't just tricking him, to make himself look religious, but also he was tricking him that he was supporting these spiritual endeavors. He was supporting Jacob, and that was part of his subterfuge towards his father, and he was saying, look, I'm fulfilling my purpose. This is what I'm supposed to do, and this is what I'm doing. And but that was perhaps what he was trying to make his father think, although that's not what he was actually doing. Okay, so that's a potential understanding of how he was tricking his father. But in any event, we have this idea that Yaakov and Esav make a deal where Esav will have the rights in this world and Yaakov will have rights in the next world. So now let's come back to Esav and his honoring of his father, and to our friend Dama ben Nasina this Roman mentioned in the Talmud and his honoring of his father. So we pose the question. It's so fascinating that these are the paradigms for honoring parents, of all people, Esav and this Roman, Dama ben Asina. Why is that? So the Maharal offers, I guess, about two approaches. They're very similar, but we'll still mention both of them. And he says that God commands us to honor our parents because our parents are who bring us into Olam Hazeh, into this world. He mentions there's a passage in the Talmud that says that if a person finds a lost object belonging to their father, and they find a lost object belonging to their teacher, their Rebbe, and they can only return one of them. So which one takes precedence? The father or the Rebbe? And the Talmud says the lost object of the Rebbe would take precedence. Why? It says because the father brings them into this world, and the Rebbe brings them into the next world. The teacher brings them into the next world. That's what the Talmud says. So the Maharal wants to deduce from there that the main aspect of the mitzvah of honoring a parent is because the parent brought them into this world. Now, if the parent also brings them into the next world, then that's also provides spiritual guidance. Then that may apply too. But at its core, he's saying we see that the commandment of honoring parents is because the parent brings them into this world. So says the Maharal, and based on our introduction, that Esav was to be the inheritor of this world. Yaakov was to be the inheritor of the next world. So therefore, Esav's appreciation for the commandment of honoring parents, his recognition, this is what it was all about for him. Life was all about this world, and that's it. And the next world had no significance to him. He wasn't even necessarily going to get any portion in the next world. So all that mattered to him was this world. So he had much greater appreciation for his parents in terms of them bringing him into this world. And so therefore he excelled in that particular commandment, because that's what it's about. That's what it was about, the way he understood it, the way it could be understood. Again, with any mitzvah, we have multiple perspectives, but this is the perspective that the Maharal is taking and explaining that the reason behind the mitzvah to honor parents is because they bring us into this world. And so Esav, who was very much focused on this world, and that was the portion that he had in his deal with Yaakov, that he had been designated. So he excelled and focused on that on that mitzvah, and the same is true for Dama ben Asina. This Roman also was very focused on life in this world, and so that therefore it's specifically a Gentile, someone who's more focused on this world as opposed to a Jew who's more focused on the next world. So it's not that obviously we also have the commandment to honor parents, but we're not necessarily as focused on or as attuned as someone who is more focused on matters of this world than matters of the next world. And that's why these are the two paradigms, Esav and this Roman Dam ben Asina, for this commandment. To say it in another way, which is very similar, that he says, the Maharal goes on, and he says that the way that it's described in the Talmud is that there are three partners in creation. So there's the mother, the father, and God. And the mother and the father provide the physical makeup of a person, and God then breathes in the soul, breathes in the neshama, and so again, someone who it's a very similar thing, but just said a little bit differently. Someone who is focused on the material and on the body, so has entirely focused in their gratitude to the parents, and therefore would excel in the mitzvah of honoring parents. But someone who is also focused on the soul, on the neshama, and recognizes that aspect of a person, so they will focus, at least, also on their soul and on honoring God, and that will diminish at least a little bit their focus on honoring parents. So again, the idea isn't that we shouldn't honor our parents as much. This isn't the point, but the idea is, why is it that we would find that Esav, of all people, and Dama ben Nesina, of all people, would be the paradigms, specifically a Gentile would be a paradigm of honoring parents? The reason is because they have a different focus, and it's specifically that focus. It's the focus of Olam Hazeh, of this world, or the focus of the body, and that which is given to us by our parents. Therefore, they would excel in that specific commandment more than a Jew necessarily. But a Jew who also is focused on the next world and on their soul, so it shifts the focus somewhat, and therefore they don't necessarily rise to the same level, and therefore they are not the paradigms. We don't find a paradigm of honoring parents within the Jewish people. We find it outside the Jewish people in two Gentiles. So that's the Maharal's explanation for that. Okay, so but I want to leave us off with maybe more of something that has more of a take-home message, a practical message, and that is based on Michtav Me'Eliyahu, Rav Eliyahu Dessler, and he is discussing the idea of gratitude, and he also is dealing with this question of how can it be that we find such a contradiction within one person, Esav, where on the one hand we gave the example, he's coveting these garments and killing the owner to steal them. We have other sources in our tradition that he murdered, and he did all sorts of things, and yet he excels in this one mitzvah of honoring parents. How could somebody live such a contradictory existence? So Rav Dessler quotes a passage in the Talmud that says as follows. It says that Canaan was one of the grandchildren of Noach, and he was the founder, I guess, of the nation of Canaan. It says that he commanded his children regarding 5 things. These were his 5 commands to his descendants: love each other, love stealing, love impropriety, hate your masters, and don't speak the truth. That's what the Talmud says. So numbers 2 through 5 are clearly bad. Love stealing, love sexual impropriety, hate your masters, don't speak the truth. I mean, hate your masters, you have to know what that means exactly, but number 1, love each other, right? That sounds good. So how does that fit in with what he was telling them? So Rav Dessler gives a analogy. He says a band of robbers right? And murderers. They hide out in the forest and they attack, travelers. So how do they all love stealing and killing, obviously, right? So why don't they just all rob and steal from each other and just attack each other? So because then they're not going to be able to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. So they have to create they have to have a bond of trust with each other, and that can then allow them to attack others who are traveling. Now, does that trust and that bond that they have with each other and how they watch out for each other and take care of each other, is that because they are what we would call Baalei Chesed? Are they performers of kindness? And so they're so kind to each other. Look how nice they're being to each other, right? They must be that they excel in the attribute of kindness. So obviously not. Why are they showing love and care to each other? Because they love themselves, each one. And in order for any of them to fulfill his own desires, they have to be able to get along and come together and form a bond of trust. And so really, their desire for closeness and the love that they show to each other and the protection and the care that they take for each other all comes from their desire to steal and murder from other people. So you can have love each other and love stealing and love lots of other bad things, but the love each other's, because in order to be able to accomplish that, you have to be able to form a bond of trust, to band together to do all those bad things that they were seeking to do. So says Rav Dessler that Esav, who excelled in honoring his father, it was also a practical calculation. It wasn't that he was such a good guy. He clearly wasn't such a good guy. So there was a practical calculation that caused him to perform this mitzvah to its fullest. And that is that Esav recognized that a father provides for his children when they're young, so that the child will later provide for the father. So basically Esav made the calculation: I'm going to get old one day, and I want my kids to take care of me. So I'm going to do this. So I have to do that for my father. So they'll see how I treat my father, and that way they'll treat me the same way. And so therefore he doesn't just do it, he does it in the best way, right? He's the best at it, because this way he'll be able to get the same from his children. There's a cold, practical calculation in how he's doing this. And what that means, though, is that it's not coming from the attribute of gratitude towards his father, and rather it's purely for his own gains, for his own needs. And although we don't see this explicitly anywhere, but I guess this is the conclusion that Rav Dessler comes to based on what we see about this guy, right? Clearly he was selfish and murderous and all those things. How can that coexist with the way that he honors his father? It must have been for selfish purposes. And really what the important takeaway that Rav Dessler draws from here is that there are different forms of gratitude and different form and different ways of giving. So sometimes, the natural and the good reaction a person should have, a person who Rav Dessler in in his works, discusses a lot the difference between a giver and a taker. And one of the ideas that he talks about as a giver is that a giver should naturally have gratitude. And that is because if somebody did something for us, so the natural feeling that a person should have is, I want to give back to them. I owe them. They did something for me. I should be giving back to them. But there's different ways that a person does that. So again, if it comes from a desire to give, then that's great. There are times where that's not what it is. It's not that I feel indebted to you, I want to give back to you. If somebody is a giver, so then when they receive, it actually is like uncomfortable. Like, I want to be the one giving, and that's why there's a natural desire to give back. I don't want to be the one on the receiving end. I want to be the one on the giving end, and that's a good attribute. But sometimes a person wants to shows gratitude, but not because they're giving, but actually sometimes a display of gratitude can be a way of taking. So a person can give really for the sake of receiving. And that is, one example is what we just said, Esav. Esav is giving to his father, but he's not doing it out of a sense of giving. He's doing it out of a sense of taking. He wants to be able to take the same, to receive the same from his children. That's his goal here. It's not a demonstration of gratitude. And the same would be true for us, if for a person who only shows gratitude in order to be able to receive again in the future, right? If the reason why I say thank you is so that you do it to me again, so that you give it to me again, so that's not, or the reason why I send a thank you card or I give something in return is just so that I can receive again. So that's not giving. That's emanating not from an attribute of being a giver. That's actually emanating from the attribute of taking. I just want to receive more. So there could be, says Reb Dessler, at times demonstrations of gratitude, demonstrations of akara satov, of recognizing the good of others. While we may think of it as something good, as something giving, ideally it should be, there are ways that it can manifest itself as taking. Another example would be if I give a big thank you to you, so that others see the way that I thanked you, so that they'll also give to me, right? So that, because they want to receive that same kind of thank you. So again, that's me just trying to get more out of people, being a taker rather than being a giver. So this is Rav Dessler's approach to Esav. Esav can't be that such traits of such wickedness can coexist in someone who's a giver. He clearly wasn't a giver. So how can we understand the great way in which he honored his father? It must have been an act of taking. It must have been that he was honoring his father in order to be a taker, in order to receive himself later on. And so I think that's an important takeaway from here, is that when we show gratitude to someone, we should really contemplate where it's coming from, and make sure that we're not doing it just to be able to receive from that person again, or to be able to receive from others, but that the purpose is really because I want to be able to give back to you. I want to return the favor. I want to show you that I care, and it should come from a place of giving rather than a place of taking. All right, we'll hold there.
It's very interesting class.
Thank you.
You're welcome.